So I'm just going to go on a bit more about some of the background of actual practice and what inspires social pedagogues to work in the way that they do. Remind of social pedagogy, policy, practice and theory that addresses social issues by educational means. In many continental European countries, you find that social pedagogues are the main workforce in all sorts of people work, whether it's what we would see as social care or education. And they work as social pedagogues in, for example, social services, youth services, in the schools, in health work, so they could be in a mental health setting, sort of halfway house, something like that, working with very elderly people. They were trained, probably in a very general way. In some cases, they will, in different countries, it's slightly different from place to place. They will have actually specialised in their own sort of field from quite early on, and do practice placements and so on. But they'll have the same general understandings, working to the same principles, whatever sort of service they're working. And working in a relational way, working on the basis of their relationship with other people. And when we're trying to understand what is social pedagogy, well, first of all, people in other countries said, what do you mean you don't know what it is? Because it's always a good thing to start in research in a place where you don't know what things are, because then people tell you. And we'd say, well, we just don't, because we don't have social pedagogy in our country. And we couldn't understand it. So there was I saying, I don't know what social pedagogy is. And they were saying, look, how is it you don't have it? How can you manage? How do you work? So these are some of the, not definitions, because it's hard to define tightly, but some of the ideas, ways of talking about it that we came up with, that we'd heard people talk about, or we developed for ourselves. It's where care and education meet. It's about nurturance, socialisation, upbringing, supporting development. You don't develop people, they've got the seeds of development in themselves, wherever they are in their own lives, whatever situation they're in those situations, there are seeds for development. And about education in the broadest sense of the word. So, as I was saying earlier on, it's a professional and a personal attitude towards other people. It's rather a way of life than a technique or method. Here are some of the concepts and practices that you find in social pedagogy. And I'll go through them in details. I won't read them all out now. I'll just go through each one in detail, starting with head, heart and hands. So it's a holistic practice, and that doesn't only mean meeting the other person as a whole person, working with them as someone who's a thinking person, a feeling person, a physical person, a social person, working and taking all of that into account. It means being aware of oneself in the same sort of way. That's who I am, and that's the person I'm meeting. So you can think of some professions which are very much give prominence to the head. Some sort of teaching might be like that. You know, the sort of folks old-fashioned sort of teacher who just got the information from her brain or from the book and put it into the brain of the other. Or you can think of some sort of professions that are more interested in the heart level. in the feelings and the emotions. Therapists, for example, but not cognitive therapists, who also have an idea of how you think about things are important. Or you can think of professions which are more interested in the physical being. Psychologists. Now, none of those can actually cut off the rest, but they've got a strong focus. That's their reason for being in the job. Social pedagogues are meeting the whole person, and they're bringing themselves as a whole person. They're bringing their heart to the job. They're supporting children as a whole child, building security, self-esteem, valuing children's own contributions. I had an interesting discussion over the coffee break about how children like being brought in to just organising things to do with their own lives and how they gain in self-esteem. Those little toddlers that we saw in the video, helping themselves to porridge. And as well as that, for the social pedagogue, there's an awareness at the heart level of how I am feeling. And especially if how I am feeling can actually be getting in the way of being really open to the other person. This is too challenging. It reminds me of something. And just being aware of that can be a help. Even a help that you can ask somebody else to take over. But it can be a help to say, yes, well, I know what's going on, and I could quite easily get a bit panicky about this, I don't like this, but I'm putting it aside for one moment. So that sort of self-awareness of how I'm feeling. The hands. Social pedagogues actually are practical, would think of themselves as practical people. They don't live in an ivory tower. I think of a French young man working in a residential home in France. And I said, what do you do during the day? And I get up, I get the children's breakfast, I make the coffee, and it's French breakfast. I make the coffee and they make some toast, I think croissants. And he said, then I get them off, we all go to school, take everybody to school. And then he said, je suis la maman, I'm the mummy. It was this great beefy chap saying, I'm like a mother, I do doing practical things. So, not just because they have to be done, but because that's what life together is like. That's, living your own lives, you know that. When you're with other people, you're doing things together. You're getting things done together. That's the business life, everyday activities. The relationships are built in the course of everyday activities. Sometimes quite exciting ones, like mending a motorbike, as we saw in the video. Would be exciting for me, terrifying, I think. But at any rate, it's when you're doing things together, everyday activities, and being practical. So being open to creativity as well. A lot of social pedagogues training will have a large element of either creative activities or open air activities as part of the ongoing training. In Denmark, they would have 25% of their course is in creative activities. So I remember going to a college where they were doing puppetry as part of storytelling. And the team, their own puppets, evolving their show and putting it on at the end of the term. And at the same time, they were learning that children and people like to be involved in creativity. They like to be able to see a picture and say, wow, that moment of wonder. Or, yes, we did that, that's part of our history, when we went to that theatre or so on. And at the same time, the students were bringing what they were learning on their group dynamics courses to that evolving a puppet show. How are we getting on with each other? What are the hiccups? What's behind that? Who's taking on this sort of role? What sort of roles exist in our group? So they're bringing their theory to that practical work as well, that practical and creative work as well. And then, last not least, thoughtful practice, reflection. And I think reflection is not so much about going away and having a good think about something, or a good moan about something, it's just yourself. But in social pedagogy, it's saying, what are my feelings telling me? What's my theoretical background telling me? Is there anything that's helping me to make sense of this? And what are the steps forward? You know, the practicality. How am I going to develop my own way of being with people and what I bring to the situation? How am I going to be practical? How am I going to build on the successes and the less successful things of the past, taking things forward? So the head, but not unaware of the feelings, not unaware of practicality. Social pedagogues talk about sharing the same living space. So we here in this room are now sharing a common life experience. And we have different roles. And my role at the moment is to tell you what I know about social pedagogy. And your role is supportive of me. If you're all whispering to one another, or looking at your watches or your phones or something, I would go to pieces. But you know, we're all in this together. This isn't us and them. And that's the sort of understanding that social pedagogues bring to their work. Everybody in a group is contributing to the emotional climate of that group and bringing their own special contribution to what's going on in the group at any time. And by group, I can mean family, I can mean staff, reflection time together. We're all in it together. And there's no feeling of us and them, whether we're talking about different professionals working together or adults and children, as being separate. And we're all in it together, we're all forming this by our actions and our reactions and our relationship. Children's rights are very important, but not limited to the procedural rights, the UN Convention rights, the Children Act rights. Those are essential, but they're not going to come into breakfast, are they? You know, it's children having the right to make their contribution about how they live their lives and how the group works. And it doesn't mean to say that it's always what the child wants. The child is part of the group. We're in it together. And some people may have more professional responsibility and decide that at this point they give away a bit of their position. But the child has a right to be heard, and actually for that listening to be effective listening that brings things about. So it's about working in dialogue and all members of the group contributing their ideas and their experiences. You probably heard this morning people talk about the 3 Ps. And it's just a way of thinking about how the work is, what it is. When I do a job, I'm a professional person. I've got certain responsibilities, professional responsibilities. I've got skills, I've got knowledge. I bring all those into play. But I'm also a person. And some people have confused, I think, have thought that the personal is a dangerous area. So you don't talk about your own experience, you don't talk about your own feelings. But in fact, if you don't bring yourself as a person to that relationship, it's sterile. If in the relationship you're only aware of your responsibilities, of your knowledge and your skills, and you're not there as yourself, a human relationship isn't going to form. A professional-client relationship is the outcome of that way of behaving. So it's about being splitting, having feelings, allowing feelings to be expressed. And at the same time, your professionality makes some judgments about that. And that goes into the private domain. Now, part of that private domain is things that maybe some of them are so deep down in me that I'm not really aware of them. This is why I'm reacting in a certain way. And I'm not really terribly conscious of that. But there are some a little bit higher up. And the anxieties and so on that we all have. And sometimes it's great to express some of those. And sometimes you need, obviously, to make decisions about what you say in which circumstances. And it's all about context. So things that are private between myself and my husband, for example, when the children were growing up, some of those things we wouldn't have brought up with the children, depending on the context, depending on the subject. But making decisions about it, about what is private. So if I came in and I said, well, I don't know about you, but last night I stayed in this hotel out near the motorway, and noise, some drunks downstairs. I've not had a good night's sleep, and I'm not in very good condition to do this presentation today. Well, maybe that would cast a bit of a damp on the situation. Maybe in some situations in the staff room that would be necessary to say, look, I'm not up to it today, to share that privately. But if I went into work and I said to my students, much the same as I've just said, and I said, and I didn't take my Valium this morning. It's just too much. But
they'd probably all offer you one.
all those things are there. We're bringing ourselves as people, professionals, personal, and the private life into the work that we're doing. So we need self-knowledge. Teamwork, we're sharing living space with other professionals and foster carers and social workers. The evaluation that's been done now showing that closer and closer relationships and mutual understandings coming about, the teamwork being valued between groups of different professionals. Being a positive role model, and we talked about the Gandhi saying earlier on, live the change you want to make. A living world orientation. Emily Petrie and Mary Neal, they learnt in the course of their youth work, they learnt about what the living world was of those young people they were working with. They weren't coming just as sort of identikit young people into the situation. There are people who have different histories, different social issues impacting on them, different upbringings, different temperaments. That was bringing them to where they are now, and a realization that from my point of view, my perspectives are totally rational, and the same goes for everybody else. Might not make me an easy person to live with, but that's the way I see things. And I have to come to a realization that other people are the same. And that wanting to change people and take them, start here, and my view is this is how you're going to get to there, isn't going to work unless, well, even that's too instrumental. Somehow it's social pedagogy is about living alongside of people, not sort of leading them by the nose. Living alongside them, accompanying them, and respecting that that's where they are at the moment. Okay, common third, the man with the motorbike was talking about that. That's just about engaging things together. So it's not two people looking at one another and one saying to the other, all right, how are you making steps towards your goal? All the time sort of staring into the other's eyes and the other. It's not all about these intense heart-to-heart or planning. It's having a shift of focus so that in everyday activities, doing washing up together, or doing the motorbike together, or painting a picture together, it's in those activities where you've got each of you has focus outside, and maybe each of you is learning, not necessarily being expert in what you're doing, learning from each other, and just beginning to relate to each other on matters that aren't a problem. Just the ordinary everyday activities, and a way of getting to know each other better. Shared enjoyment. So, that, coming back now to the overall evaluation of the nine different studies, these are the sorts of things that were found. I don't know if I showed this slide earlier on, did I? No. Well, that people were able to have a common language, professionals have a common language, or improved organisational dynamics and teamwork, and I'm sure you'll hear examples of that in the workshops, different workshops today. There were opportunities to learn and refresh skills, and also to bring other learning into the general framework of social pedagogy. Because it's not exclusive. Social pedagogues do training in sociology, different psychology, schools, all sorts of subject areas, theoretical subject areas. So attachment training, for example, is something that can be part of social pedagogy. It can inform social pedagogy. So social pedagogy is a sort of overall framework or an umbrella, but informed by that particular set of values, convictions, and an understanding of people as developing entities. Nobody's stuck. So introducing practical and creative activities was commented on with affirmation throughout, and also throughout all 9 evaluations, people mentioned a positive attitude to risk-taking, or risk, safe and safeguarding in everyday life. And again, I think that will come up in the workshop, so I'm not going to dwell on it. Here are some things that the report said. A deeper kind of thinking, boosting confidence. 3 Ps, a model by which participants could reflect on their own behaviour, help them put into words what they were experiencing. More use of the outdoors, more fun and creativity, more practical hands-on, focused creativity on proper goals and purposes. Some of the sentences just lifted out of those reports. So there you are. That's, you can find various social pedagogy blueprints at that address. There you are. That's bringing person into the actual one of my grandchildren enjoying himself. Put his permission